Welcome back to Marvelous Videos. I'm Rylan, and today we'll be taking a look at the Scream franchise, Explained. Acclaimed for being one of the most impeccably deconstructed slasher films, and also firmly falling under the category of iconic movies, Wes Craven's Scream gave the genre of horror a whole new definition right after it hit theaters back in 1996. Guess it would not be wrong to admit that this meta-slasher flick has literally had one of the longest lives of any slasher franchise for that matter. Let's begin by addressing one of the major highlights of the movie. We all know that it's been 25 years, but we still cannot deny the fact the opening scene of the first movie of the franchise remains iconic till this very day. Full credits to Drew Barrymore and her effective performance, which made her death sequence all the more shocking. Wondering what's the secret to Barrymore's authentic reaction? Well, knowing the fact that the actor is very passionate about animals, Wes Craven would repeatedly tell Barrymore factual stories of animal cruelty every now and then to bring her to such an emotional state. So, what you get to witness on screen is nothing but real. The plotline of the movie revolves around the character of Sidney Prescott, a high school student residing in the fictitious town of Woodsboro, California. She becomes the target of a psychopathic serial killer, donning a Halloween costume called Ghostface. Based on the real-life story of the Gainesville Ripper, the film happens to be a product of screenwriter Kevin Williamson's fondness for horror flicks. You may be amazed to learn that the script of the movie was initially titled Scary Movie, which was also brought by Dimension Films. But just before the filming was completed, the movie was retitled Scream by the Weinstein brothers. The popularity of the original movie led to a series of sequels. Scream 2 materialized the following year, accomplishing an equal amount of both commercial and critical success. The franchise continued with Scream 3 in the year 2000, Scream 4 in 2011, and a television spin-off called Scream, the TV series, which launched by MTV in 2015. As for the television series, it spanned across 3 seasons, following an anthology format with diverse yet comparable characters and new narratives that were not linked to the film series. Now, with a 5th movie on the way, today's video goes out to every fan of the Scream franchise who just cannot get enough of these cult films. Before we go into today's analysis, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small step for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thanks. Now, on with the video. Scream. The small, peaceful town of Woodsboro witnesses a complete bloodbath when a masked killer starts haunting the town and murdering high school teenagers. It all starts with Casey Becker getting a naughty phone call from an unknown caller, and the duo starts talking about horror flicks. Pretty soon, the caller starts intimidating her and threatening her life. He even discloses that her boyfriend is being held captive on her very patio and commands her to answer questions about horror movies. With Becker getting one of the answers incorrect, her boyfriend gets killed right in front of her. Becker then denies to answer any further questions and is later butchered to death by the masked killer, and her dead body is made to hang from a tree. Meanwhile, Sidney Prescott, who is still struggling with the approaching death anniversary of her mother, who was killed by her lover, becomes the next target of Ghostface. However, she is lucky enough to evade him. Sidney, suspecting her boyfriend Billy Loomis of making the phone call, gets him arrested, but she ends up receiving yet another threatening call that very night. Billy gets released, and the suspicion shifts to Sidney's father, Neil Prescott, after the calls are traced to his phone. With more and more deaths taking place, the school is suspended for a while. This leads to Sidney's friends throwing a party, which is attended by most of the high school students, along with the nosy reporter Gail Weathers. She is looking for a story, as well as the town's deputy sheriff, Dewey Riley, who's on the lookout for the killer at the party. Further news of Principal Himbry's death by the killer draws many people away from the party, leaving Sidney and just a few friends there. Eventually, her friends become the victims, one after the other, and Sidney is narrowly able to escape from the house. When Dewey gets stabbed in the back while investigating the house, Sidney takes his gun for protection. In due course, her friends Randy and Stu appear, each accusing the other of being the masked murderer. Sidney goes into the house and finds a wounded Billy, who was previously attacked by the killer. She gives him the gun before he lets Randy into the house and shoots him. It is then revealed that Billy finally discloses that he's the real killer. In fact, he had been faking his injuries this whole time, and his accomplice happens to be none other than Stu. The duo also revealed that they were the ones who killed Sidney's mother, and then put the whole blame on her mother's lover, Cotton Weary. It was Billy who discovered that Sidney's mother was in a relationship with his father, and that led his mother to leave them behind. With all of these revelations taking place, Gale, having survived a previous car crash, interrupts the scene. Sydney takes advantage of the situation by knocking Billy out with an umbrella and literally dropping a TV set on top of Stu's head. Gale shoots Billy after he tries attacking Sydney once again. Randy is disclosed to be alive, and as he remarks about how a killer always resurfaces for that one last scare, Sydney takes hold of the gun, shoots Billy right in the head. Take no further chances. It is very rare that one actually gets to feast on a good slasher flick. The fact that we live in a CGI-infested world, it does kind of feel nice to chance upon a typical horror movie every once in a while. By now, you should be knowing what we're hinting at. Of course, the movie concerned is Wes Craven's 1996 slasher film, Scream, and managed to drive us to the edge of our seats throughout the whole runtime of 111 minutes. Special credits to composer Marco Beltrami for churning out such an amazing background score for the film. The fact that he deliberately disregarded all the regular horror score styles and decided to go all Western instead, taking inspiration from Ennio Morricone, a fantabulous composer of many Westerns, working out vastly in his favor. He even had different scores for different characters, and it goes without saying that he did a prolific job. Coming back to the movie, ever wondered what it was that made the movie such a cult classic? Well, for starters, it was Craven's Scream. It actually gets credits for not only reinventing teen horror, but also reviving the genre of horror altogether. Back in that time period, the 90s, kids were so done with traditional horror flicks, showcasing blood-sucking vampires, haunted houses, or distorted creatures. So, one can actually imagine how the audience reacted to Craven and Williamson coming up with a different kind of horror, one where you could easily laugh and scream both at the same time. The movie was not only an instant hit, but also served as a breath of fresh air given to the genre. Be it the iconic mask, the effective one-liners, let's not miss out on the exceptional self-awareness, especially when it comes to horror cliches. Everything makes this flick just as original. In fact, it was solely the self-awareness trait of the movie that let it move towards new directions. For instance, scenes that are normally predictable in other slasher flicks suddenly become way too intense in this movie. Mind you, this movie is a must-watch. If you are someone who hasn't watched it yet, you have some serious catching up to do. Scream 2. 2 years have passed since the terrifying events at Woodsboro. Sidney Prescott, along with fellow Woodsboro survivor Randy Meeks, is currently studying at Windsor College, and both of them are trying to get on with their lives. In the meantime, Cotton Weary, exonerated for the murder of Sidney's mother, is finally let out of prison and is trying to gain back popularity on his ill-fated incarceration. On the other hand, news reporter Gail Weathers' book, based on the events of Sidney's life, titled Woodsboro Murders, has not only turned into a bestseller, but has also been made into a film, amusingly called Stab. However, with a screening of the new movie approaching, a new cycle of deaths begins, with the murders of Windsor College seniors Bill Stevens and Maureen Evans. Police officer Dewey Riley comes to offer Sidney protection. Initially, no one believes that the murders are in any way connected to the Woodsboro incident. It is only after Ghostface brutally kills the student Cece Cooper, whose real name happens to be Casey, that Gale deduces that the new killer is actually targeting students with the same names as the Woodsboro Slade victims. Randy also theorizes that the killer is likely to be someone whom Sidney knows. The body count starts piling up. The new Ghostface manages to murder Randy inside of the broadcast van of Gale. While 2 officers arrive and drive Sidney and her best friend Hallie McDaniel to a local police station, Ghostface makes an appearance and kills the officers. Although the killer is knocked unconscious by the subsequent struggle, Ghostface revives and slaughters Hallie. Sidney is able to escape for the time being. When she goes back to campus, she is shocked to find her boyfriend, Derek Feldman, bound to a cross in the college auditorium. As Sidney begins to untie Derek, Ghostface emerges. He discloses himself to be Derek's best friend, Mickey Altieri, and without any warning, shoots Derek. He tells Sidney about his master plan of how he planned to kill her, and then get himself arrested so that he can eventually put the blame on the element of violence, as shown in movies, for the murders during his trial, and ultimately get released on the grounds of insanity. Next, he reveals local journalist Debbie Salt as his accomplice. It does not take Sidney much time to realize that this whole time it was Mrs. Loomis, or in other words, the mother of Billy Loomis, who is seeking revenge against Sidney for killing her son in the first film. Of course, she betrays Mickey and shoots him as well, but right before Mickey falls down, he manages to shoot Gale, who falls off of a stage. This results in an intense fight between Sidney and Mrs. Loomis, and with Cotton interrupting their fight, he is able to take the upper hand and shoots her right in the throat. Gale is found still alive, but with Mickey resurfacing and attacking the group again, Sidney and Gale react by not only shooting him to death, but also making sure that Mrs. Loomis was dead as well, once and for all. You might be surprised to know that screenwriter Kevin Williamson originally came up with a 5-page rough draft of a sequel to Scream, while auctioning his original script in the hopes of tempting bidders, the potential of buying a franchise. It was only after an officious test screening of the 1996 flick, keeping in mind that both the financial and critical success of the movie, that Dimension Films decided to go ahead with it. Scream was still being screened at the theaters at the time when the original cast returned to reprise their roles. This was accompanied by Craven's direction and Marco Beltrami providing the background score. As for the plot twists, all of them were a matter of hot privacy all throughout the production. Fascinatingly, the screenplay was not just profoundly guarded, but also limited to the most important staff. It goes without saying that none of the cast actually knew how the film would end, because the final 10 pages were kept so secret. So, when the initial 40 pages of the script were leaked on the net, Williamson was left with no choice but to rewrite them. This means that the movie literally went in production without a complete script. But did that stop the sequel from earning about 1/3 of its total gross of $101.3 million just in the opening weekend? Well, we all know the answer to that one. While it is true that the sequel was a step down from its predecessor, you have to admit that it still had a perfect blend of action as well as humor. It's way bolder in terms that Ghostface hardly wastes much time killing the victims here. Indeed, it is a movie that's bound to keep you entertained throughout the whole runtime of 120 minutes. Scream 3. Sidney Prescott has been living a life in recluse as a crisis counselor, with fear at the back of her mind that another killer may strike soon. And guess what? That's precisely what happens. A third film, based on the brutal murders of Ghostface, comes under production. The killer is on the loose yet again, and having found out Sidney's location, the masked killer forces her out of hiding and draws her to Hollywood. On the other hand, Cotton Weary, who is currently the host of a successful TV talk show entitled 100% Cotton, gets slaughtered, along with his girlfriend by Ghostface. Following the murders, Detective Mark Kincaid gets in touch with Gale Weathers, who also travels to Hollywood and finds Dewey Riley, employed as an advisor on the set of Stab 3. The masked tormentor continues killing cast members of the movie, with Gale, Dewey, and the remaining cast of Stab 3 attending a birthday party of the film's director, Roman Bridger. Ghostface emerges, and Roman's body is found in the basement. Gale and Dewey are eventually held hostage at the mansion, and Sidney is commanded by Ghostface to get there and save the duo. It is there that the killer discloses himself to be Roman, clearly having faked his death thanks to a bulletproof vest that helped him survive. But that's not all. Roman further confesses to being Sidney's half-brother, as in born to their mother Maureen, who once worked as an actress in Hollywood. He had apparently tried to reconnect with her, and when that didn't happen, Roman filmed Maureen and all the men that she flirted with. Sooner or later, he showed Billy Loomis the videotape of his father and Maureen, thereby giving himself credit for all the murders that have taken place so far. Upon discovering the amount of fame that Sidney had received for all his actions, he eventually snapped and had Sidney drawn to Hollywood. As he tells her of his plans of framing her for all the murders, the duo gets into a fight, and this leads to Roman shooting Sidney in the chest. And although Sidney disappears, she makes an appearance yet again and stabs Roman in the back, revealing that she too was donning a bulletproof vest the entire time. Gale and Dewey arrive at the scene, but Roman resurfaces all of a sudden with a knife. Dewey shoots him, unaware of his vest, but when Sidney tells him to shoot Roman in the head, Dewey ultimately complies, and Roman meets his fated death. Kevin Williamson's commitment to other projects projected in his inability to come up with a full script for Scream 3. Hence, we have Aaron Kruger replacing him as the movie's screenwriter. It's reported that Kruger had disregarded several notes of Williamson's. No wonder the production faced a little too many troubles, especially with a script getting rewritten. But having said that, the movie actually set a record right on its opening weekend and became the 7th widest opening for an R-rated movie. To all the fans of the franchise, what sets apart this movie from its counterparts is the sole fact that it keeps itself entirely distinct from the first two movies. Horror hounds will be happy to know that this movie boasts less humor and more horror. When it comes to the opening sequence of the movie, the pre-credit murder scene conclusively happens to be one of the highlights of the whole production, along with the climax. No wonder it's often addressed as the best movie of the franchise, but that's for you to watch and judge for yourself. So, if your hopes regarding the movie aren't unrealistically high, and there's no reason for you not to enjoy Scream 3. Scream 4. Sidney Prescott comes back to her hometown to promote her self-help book. Nevertheless, her book signing tour gets interrupted after some evidence relating to a recent murder in Woodsboro is found in her rental car. Sidney not only becomes the prime suspect, but is also not allowed to leave town until things get resolved. On the other hand, Dewey Riley is now the sheriff of the town and married to Gail Weathers. Gail is struggling with a writer's block. In an effort to be in the spotlight once again, Gail decides to get her old spunk back and probes deeper into the murders herself. Sidney reconnects with her cousin, Jill Robert, and Aunt Kate, and stays over at their place for the time being. But that night, their neighbor, Olivia Morris, gets killed by Ghostface, who has resurfaced and has started tormenting the whole town once again. Meanwhile, Gail attends a screening party of the Stab franchise, being held that night at a farm. Probe deeper into the matter, and while she's at it, Ghostface emerges and stabs her in the shoulder. As for Sidney, she gets a call from the killer, who threatens to harm Jill. Upon finding out that Jill has left for her friend Kirby's place, Sidney drives out there. The old game of horror movie trivia continues, as Kirby is coerced to answer the questions in order to save a high school movie fanatic named Charlie Walker, who is tied up outside. Kirby manages to answer the questions correctly, and she goes outside to untie Charlie, only to get stabbed by the latter, who discloses that he himself was Ghostface. Sidney is also confronted by Charlie, but then gets stabbed by Jill, who not only happens to be his accomplice, but also the mastermind behind the carnage. Jill elucidates the fact that she did everything out of jealousy, given how Sidney garnered so much fame for having survived all the murders. She further adds that she has plans of framing her ex-boyfriend, Trevor Sheldon, as Ghostface, executing him as well as Charlie to make it look as though he was Trevor's accomplice. Wanting to take credit for being the solitary survivor, she stabs Sidney and also deliberately mutilates herself. With the police arriving, Sidney, along with Jill, are taken to the hospital. However, after finding out that Sidney survived, Jill goes to her room to try and end her life, but instead is at the receiving end when Sidney eventually disables her with a defibrillator and then shoots her. While the previous movie was initially released as the concluding chapter of the film, the franchise was revived in this 2011 meta-slasher flick, boasting a screenplay by Kevin Williamson yet again. It's also reported that the screenwriter had recurrent clashes with the Weinsteins, and that was one of the reasons why Aaron Kruger was also hired during production for the rewriting of the script. Naturally, the final script was quite different as compared to the original drafts. As for the movie, it acquired mixed reviews. The original cast was praised for their performance, and Wes Craven for his direction. Nevertheless, it did receive its share of criticism as well, especially for its dependency on cliched tactics. Having said that, you can't deny the fact that the movie had certain unavoidable predictability to some of the events shown. Horror fans are bound to admire just how impeccably everything is executed. Scream 4 marks the final film directed by Craven before his death in 2015. Made on a budget of $40 million, it turned out to be the lowest grossing movie in the whole franchise. Scream TV series. Also known as Scream, the TV series, this anthology slasher television sequence was developed for both MTV and VH1. Based on Wes Craven and Kevin Williamson's Scream film series, the show spanned across 3 exhilarating seasons, producing 30 exciting episodes. Season 1 and 2 are set in the fictitious town of Lakewood. It revolves around a teenage girl named Emma Duval, who is connected to the dreadful events of the town's past. As the killer's core obsession starts to take a grip post a vicious murder, Emma somehow finds herself in the middle of the impending danger. With her family and friends at risk, she embarks on a journey to unravel the shady mysteries of the town and also expose the identity of the tormenting Lakewood slasher. The 3rd season centers on a local football star in Atlanta named Dion Elliott, who is also literally plagued by his tragic past, with Ghostface making use of Dion's darkest secrets against him and carrying out the killing rampage. His activities start affecting Dion's rich and deserving future plans, and also the lives of his friends and family members as well. They eventually end up being the potential victims of the ill-fated masked killer. Future of the franchise. It's true that there is a 5th Scream movie on the way, and there's no stopping the upcoming film from slashing its way into the theaters sometime in the next year. Fans of the franchise will be happy to know that Kevin Williamson will be serving as executive producer, alongside Chad Villela, co-directed by Matt Bettinelli-Olpin and Tyler Gillette, as well as co-written by James Vanderbilt. and Guy Busick. The film will have Neve Campbell, David Arquette, and Courtney Cox once again reprising their roles. It has also been reported that the storyline will vary a little bit from the original. We have Sydney coming back to her old hometown after a suspicious line of copycat murders torment the sleepy, peaceful suburb. Rest assured that you'll enjoy the gore-dipped movie with a gracious amount of revolutionary humor. With the film's post-production ending last month, it was Matt Bettinelli-Olpin who announced the completion of the film via Twitter. Scream 2022 is complete. We're so excited for you all to see it soon. #4Wes. For those of you wondering about the hashtag, of course, it is a straight reference to Wes Craven. Apparently scheduled for a January release next year, the latest Scream installment also features Jenna Ortega, Alyssa Barrera, Jasmine Savoy Brown, Mikey Madison, Sonia Benamar, Dylan Minnette, Jack Quaid, Mason Gooding, and Kyle Gallner as the all-new cast. We at Marvelous Videos are counting down the days. How about you? Tell us in the comments below. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to send a like and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. For Marvelous Videos, I'm Rylan. Have a good one and be safe.